All right, let's just jump right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're taking a deep, true crime-style dive straight into the criminal underworld of hacking. But listen, we're not talking about complex coding or cracking zero-day encryption here. No, we are looking at the ultimate vulnerability in literally any system, human psychology. It's a world where a quick smile, a simple phone call, and just a little bit of misplaced confidence can bypass the absolute most sophisticated security networks on the planet. $10,200,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. Back in 1978, a consultant named Stanley Rifkin walked away with exactly that amount from Security Pacific National Bank. And here's the wild part. He didn't use a gun, he didn't have a getaway car, he didn't even use a computer. All he used was a regular payphone right there in the building's lobby, a fake identity, and 2 stolen codes he just happened to peek at in the wire room. He proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that massive multi-million-dollar heists don't require force. They just require the right words. And that brings us to our source material for this explainer, The Art of Deception. This book was written by Kevin Mitnick, a guy who famously went from being the world's most notorious hacker, literally feared by massive corporations and the US government alike, to becoming a leading security consultant. In this book, Mitnick lays out exactly how easily you and I can be manipulated. And today, we're going to break down his absolute core tactics. So let's start with Section 1, Security's Weakest Link, and the Illusion of Safety. All right, it's time to shatter that false sense of security we all kind of walk around with. See, there's a massive disconnect in how we protect our data. Organizations out there are spending absolute fortunes on technological security. We're talking firewalls, biometrics, intrusion detection systems, the whole shebang. But here's the thing. Those tools are mostly just stopping amateur script kiddies. The real professional attackers largely ignore all that expensive tech. Instead, they exploit human gullibility, our natural trust, and our ignorance. They are completely bypassing multi-million-dollar defenses for, honestly, the cost of a phone call. Which brings us to the core concept here, social engineering. Simply put, this is the use of influence and persuasion to deceive people into revealing sensitive information or handing over access. It bypasses the technology entirely. And the really tricky part here? It's that our national character is literally conditioned to trust our neighbors. We actually want to be helpful. But as Mitnick points out, that beautiful, trusting innocence is exactly what makes us so fundamentally vulnerable to these deceptive tactics. Moving on to Section 2, Weaponizing Innocuous Information and the Anatomy of a Con. Now, let me ask you something. Would you willingly hand over a seemingly worthless piece of company data to a total stranger? You're probably thinking, no way, definitely not. But let's actually see how a pro does it. Mitnick shares this incredible story of a private investigator, let's just call him Oscar Grace. So Oscar is hunting down a cheating husband's hidden assets, right? And to do this, he needed a specific bank's internal merchant ID for a service called credit checks. Now, this ID isn't a password, it's really just a reference number. Sounds totally harmless. So Oscar calls up a bank, posing as this friendly survey worker for credit checks. He starts asking a few totally innocent questions about, branch hours, customer service, and then he just smoothly slides in, oh, by the way, what merchant ID are you folks currently using? And the clerk, just wanting to be helpful, hands it right over without a second thought. So why did Oscar succeed? Well, he knew exactly how to avoid what hackers call burning the source. This is hacker lingo for when an attacker tips their hand and the victim actually realizes they're being played. Because look, if a source is burned, that attacker can literally never call that office back. But Oscar totally avoided this. How? By burying his one real question deep inside a list of perfectly innocent survey questions, keeping up this super believable, friendly pretext the entire time. And this perfectly aligns with a famous quote from security expert Bruce Schneier. He says, security is not a product, it's a process. And treating internal identifiers, like that merchant ID or maybe a department cost center code or even an employee number, treating those as trivial information is a massive failure in that security process. Because to a social engineer, those aren't just random numbers. They are the exact puzzle pieces they use to build a totally devastating attack. That takes us to Section 3, The Art of Building Trust and the Video Store Con. Here's something you really need to understand. Social engineers don't just exploit existing trust, they completely manufacture it out of thin air. Take this con, for example. A debt collector posing as Tommy called up a video store clerk named Ginny. Step 1, he praised her customer service just to build some quick rapport. Step 2, he posed as a fellow store manager from a totally different branch. And get this, over 2 whole weeks, he called her 3 or 4 times with just harmless questions, chatting about local news, basically becoming her comfortable, trusted coworker. And then he manufactured the emergency. Suddenly, Tommy calls in a total panic. He says a car just crashed into a pole outside his store, his branch's computers are completely down, and he's got this really frustrated customer waiting. He asks Ginny to do him a solid and pull up the customer's account in her system. She does it, and that's when he hits her with the payload. He says, hey, he wants to put this on his Visa, but he doesn't have it with him. What's the card number and expiration date on file? And Ginny, trusting her new work friend Tommy, gladly just reads off the credit card number. Boom. The con is complete. Mitnick drops this classic Albert Einstein quote in the book. Only 2 things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the former. Now, I know that stings a bit in this context, but honestly, it's not really about stupidity. It's about how a totally natural, beautiful human desire to just be helpful can be entirely weaponized against an organization. Because if employees aren't explicitly trained to question authority and verify identities, they're going to hand over the keys to the castle. And they'll do it with a smile.
All right, let's dive into Section 4, Reverse Social Engineering, and the Helpful Hacker.
Okay, this is where things get truly, truly devious. Imagine a scenario where an attacker doesn't just trick you into giving them information, but actually manipulates you into practically begging them to hack your computer. That is reverse social engineering. It's a devastating attack where the hacker secretly causes a massive problem for the target and then just perfectly positions themselves as the savior. Because the victim is the one initiating the call for help, the attacker instantly gains this incredibly high level of trust and credibility. It is a brilliant psychological trap.
Let me tell you how this actually played out in a real corporate setting. An attacker, we'll call him Bobby Wallace, called up an employee posing as IT doing a routine network check. Just a friendly chat, right? During the call, he innocently asked the employee to read the port number off the back of their computer. The employee says, sure, it's port 647. Bobby says thanks, hangs up, and then immediately calls the company's real network operations center, pretending to be that employee, and asks them to remotely disable port 647. And then, Bobby simply sits back on his couch and waits for his disposable cell phone to ring. Sure enough, the panicked employee, who is now entirely cut off from the network, calls Bobby. Why? Because Bobby was the IT guy who had conveniently given him his direct line earlier that day. Bobby then magically fixes the internet by having the real IT desk turn the port back on. The employee is, of course, incredibly grateful. And playing right on that ironic gratitude, Bobby says, hey, just to prevent future drops, download this quick diagnostic tool for me. The employee happily obliges, totally unaware that he was actually installing a Trojan horse, a hidden piece of malicious software. And the terrifying aftermath here is what hackers call a remote command shell. By installing that Trojan, the employee unknowingly granted Bobby complete, invisible, administrative access to his machine. Literally from his couch, this hacker could copy private accounting files, he could read the CEO's executive emails, and just hunt for whatever corporate secrets he wanted. And the wildest part? The employee thought he had just received really great IT support. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5. Hardening the human firewall and defensive computing. So what's the solution here? How do organizations actually foil these attackers when the threat is just a friendly, helpful voice on the phone? Mitnick draws a really fantastic comparison here. Think about it. We are all taught defensive driving, right? To constantly scan the road, anticipate the mistakes of other drivers, watch out for unseen hazards. Well, in today's highly wired, instantly connected world, we have to adopt that exact same mindset for our data. Defensive computing isn't just a seminar for IT professionals anymore. It is a mandatory survival skill for absolutely everyone. To survive in this environment, everyone really needs to adopt some strict protocols. First off, you cannot assume a caller is an insider just because they know your company lingo or because they happen to know your boss's name. That stuff is easy to find. You have to verify their identity. Second, you must be willing to politely question authority figures. Don't just blindly follow orders over the phone. You also have to protect seemingly innocuous information, like those internal identifiers we talked about. Always verify if the person actually has a need to know. And above all else, do not rely solely on your company's firewall or tech to protect you from human manipulation. So, what you should really take away from this entire explainer is this one simple mantra. When in doubt, verify, verify, verify. Adopting a strict data classification policy and really encouraging a culture of healthy paranoia, that's the only real way to thwart these billion-dollar security bypasses. It's all about empowering every single employee from the bottom to the top to be able to politely push back and just say, hey, let me just confirm this and call you right back.
It fundamentally changes how you look at everyday interactions, doesn't it? It fundamentally changes how you look at everyday interactions, doesn't it? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one lingering, maybe even slightly unsettling thought to take with you into your workday tomorrow. Who did you trust on the phone today?